Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are on episode 67, and we have a very big topic today. But before we get into it, I want to say hi to Jamie. How's it going?
Hello, how are you? Glad to be here. It's a good topic today.
I know. So, to give it away, we are going to be talking about trust. This is a very big topic, and we are going to address the impact of self trust that it has on the relationship that we have with ourselves, as well as our recovery. Then, we're going to talk about how those trust practices can parlay to others. After all, trust is at the heart of every significant relationship. So, let's dive into how trust gets created, grown, and as well can also be compromised. And
Mhm.
we're going to talk about things also by diving into how trust and addiction intersect. So we're going to take things up a notch with that. So this is a big episode. So strap in and get ready for the ride, guys.
Yeah, so a quote that I love that talks about trust goes like this. You may be deceived if you trust too much, but you will live in torment if you don't trust enough. And that quote is attributed to a man named Frank Crane. I have had issues with trust as long as I can remember, but I did not realize how deep they were until after my divorce. Divorce, of course, is traumatic
Yeah.
for most people, and in this case, it made me begin to take stock of my life. And as I dated after my divorce, I began to reflect on my failed romantic relationships, um, either failing because I was leaving the relationship or failing because it wasn't a match from his perspective. And I was looking at why it was a repeat pattern for me. I
Mhm.
realized that I never let people in for fear that they would let me down, belittle me, or make me feel small, or otherwise diminish me in some way. I keep people at a distance. This impacts my ability to have close, connected relationships. I used to think I had trust issues because I grew up in a family where things were not psychologically safe, and that's very true. But I've come to realize that there's more to it than that. Have you ever struggled with trust issues thinking they were caused by something outside of yourself? That trust was a matter of what other people did, how they treated you, or how they disappointed you. This was my constant state for many years, and it often led me to my addictive patterns, especially with food. Once I realized this, I thought it may be time to consider that perhaps trust issues for me were more about me than they were about other people.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think when you are deep in addiction, you have no sense of trust in yourself, especially because for me, all the promises of staying out of the sugar bowl, for example, only left me face planted right in the middle of the sugar bowl. It was so upsetting, but I couldn't figure my way out of this. And making promises to myself was always an epic failure. Plus, when you are deep in addiction, you make colossal mistakes that often involve others, which breeds more distrust. And it's this ugly, vicious cycle. Then you do even goofier things like trying to cover your tracks from your last mistake. It's exhausting.
It is. And when I began recovery, I had to learn how to trust and more importantly, what trust even was. So I really had no idea
Mhm.
not only how to do it, but what it even looked and felt like. I really had so many issues with trust from my family of origin, and I sometimes still do. And sometimes, unfortunately, they even show up between Paige and I, where I'm not trusting some of the ways that we engage with each other because I'm so used to questioning everything around me with people that are closest to me. And
Mhm.
while I may have some wounds from not receiving the emotional nurturing I needed when growing up, when that's my reality, I have trust issues not just because I distrust others, but because I don't trust myself.
Mhm.
I'll read that again. I have trust issues not because I distrust others, but because I don't trust myself.
Mhm.
That's right, guys. This was a very surprising revelation when I learned this in recovery. It helped me realize once I learned it that what I needed to do in order to fully trust other people was to begin to trust myself. And what I learned about trust is that we may have trust issues. So I wanted to understand, where this came from, where this sort of this mindset I had came from. And I learned that trust issues originate in how we view people, if we view people with suspicion of motives, if we don't share our true feelings, if we assume the worst intentions by others, if we make every intention all about us, how could they do this to me? And if we doubt our own capabilities or decisions. So this is the whole idea, right? Where if you think about this in recovery speak, which is something I like to translate here and there,
Mhm.
it's the whole idea of not assuming positive intent, right? It's
Mhm.
not assuming positive intent. It's assuming other people have motives or are trying to do something from a place of control or manipulation. Not sharing our true feelings. That's not speaking up for ourselves, is another way
Mhm.
of saying that. Not speaking up for our needs, not speaking up for when we're hurt or when we're confused or when we need a boundary that we're trying to assert hasn't been honored. That's all an example of how it can show up in a lack of trust because we're not trusting ourselves to speak up for our very needs.
Mhm.
And then the whole idea of thinking about every interaction, how it affects us, instead of using compassion to look at the other person and what they might be going through, and then doubting our own capabilities and decisions. And that's another example of sort of that self-abandonment.
Mhm.
So, Paige, what do you think happens when we operate on this sort of non-trust level? I think we keep ourselves closed off from opportunities available to us, and that cuts us off from the flow of life. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I have like three different thoughts racing around in my head. First of all, when you were talking about how you said you realized you didn't, it wasn't others that were didn't trust, it was your own self. And I was thinking that makes so much sense because if you trust yourself, that means you trust yourself enough to know I'm safe. No matter what's happening around me, I trust myself that I'm going to take care of myself and I'm safe and I'll be able to spot out any.
Navigate this, yeah.
Yeah. So that makes perfect sense to me. And then when you were talking about people, if you view people with suspicion and with their motives, I don't know about you, but I've been around people that it's almost like they're scanning the room like a detective looking for things and almost, I'm going to use the word paranoid about
Yes.
what other people are doing and they're out to get them. And I saw the way they were looking at me or
Yes.
something. I've known a few people that are always, would walk to the parking lot to their car, just scanning the parking lot. And I probably need to be a little bit more aware than I am, but I sometimes am oblivious in those situations. But those people are working overtime all the time, just looking for nefarious things, which I would think would be
Oh,
exhausting.
it is exhausting. It's called hypervigilance, and it
Yeah,
is
I don't want to be, I mean, you need to be aware, right? But hypervigilance that's no fun. Always being suspicious of the world. I don't want to live like that. But anyway, I do
I
love this.
don't think the people who are hypervigilant want to live like that either.
Oh, very
Truly.
statement.
They don't want to live, and I know because I've lived it, right? I've lived it from a childhood of trauma. It does create hypervigilance, and I will say there is no part of that I wanted to live.
So
But
what's the answer?
it was something that I had adopted as a young child and did in my 20s, 30s, early 40s regularly without even thinking. It was just my default mode.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say that there are a lot of people who, once they realize and become self-aware of the fact that they do it, they don't want to do it anymore. They need to learn new skills.
So there's the answer. So
Mhm,
becoming aware is the first step that you're doing that and having a desire
mhm.
to change.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. I'm glad we talked a little bit more about that. And I love this conversation so much because I fall deeply into the category, like I had mentioned, of trusting others above myself. My initial reaction is to believe whatever anyone says. It never occurs to me that people are lying. Like if you're watching a jury trial, my 2020s that I like to watch, I'm like, they're on trial. I'm like, well, he said he didn't do it.
Right.
He just seems so believable. So yes, my initial reaction is to believe what everybody says and assume they are smarter than me. So my bigger problem is trusting too much, and that has gotten me into trouble. So I think hyper either way, whether hyper vigilant or hyper trusting, can be problematic.
Good point.
I think because I operate I don't operate with ulterior motives. I'm very surface level. I don't go too deep with things. I just assume that other people aren't having ulterior motives either. So I need to learn to pause and confirm before being completely open and vulnerable. My recovery journey has definitely revealed where changes in my life have to take place. For instance, I've had people say to me, "You are really not going to ever have that dessert again, or eat sugar again, or enjoy the holidays again," which in the past, I might have even questioned myself, believing they were a greater authority over me than me. I have learned to say a firm no and believe in myself, and
Mhm.
that's the right path for me. It
Right.
has changed social situations with friends. I now take walks with girlfriends or join together for workouts versus go to lunch. Some of my holiday dessert traditions have fallen by the wayside. I have had to remind relatives who push sugar on me over and over again that I am not eating sugar, which makes some relationships stressful and frustrating. People
Yeah.
don't like it when you change. If it's going to make them uncomfortable, it puts a spotlight on areas they may want to change but haven't addressed, and it may foster feelings of guilt, and people do not like that. But you have to be willing to trust that your life and your sobriety is worth all these little inconveniencing that betters yourself. We are in the business of bettering people. So how could I have possibly known what it was like to be sugar free till I actually started living that life? So being willing to walk into the unknown is part of the deal.
Yeah.
But every time I was willing to do a hard thing, it built up more trust in myself. It's definitely a process. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's just small aha moments that build on
Mhm.
top of one another. That for me, that's how trust developed. And age helps too. Age, experience, wisdom helps too.
Yeah, exactly. And I will add to that. It sounds in this in your example, faith was a huge part of your journey to trust, right?
Oh,
So having the leap of faith that you made
yeah,
in the example you gave around the food, having that leap of faith allowed you to trust in yourself.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I think I'm headed in the right direction. My gut tells me move this way. I'm going to trust my gut and we're going to try this out until otherwise notified. And I've often said that recovery is a series of edits. We're just making edits down the
Yep.
path.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yes, I love that. Uh, when you talk to someone who has many years of recovery under their belt, it's very interesting to me that it's clear they're not the same person they were when they were struggling with their addiction.
Mhm.
They're older, wiser, more aware, and I think they're constantly evolving, and that's been my experience. I'm constantly evolving in the ways that I'm looking at things in my addiction.
Yeah.
Um, and they've learned, and I've certainly, that's been my experience. I've learned a thing or two about myself, and I've learned a thing or two about others, and sometimes that serves me well, and sometimes it bites me. Um, and my assumptions typically are what gets in the way, but all of this doesn't happen overnight. It takes a few steps forward and a few steps back, and then less steps forward, more steps back, and pretty soon it's more steps forward and less steps back. So the question becomes, how do I hang in there and just trust that my choice to get help is actually going to work, especially when we take steps backwards that we don't want to take.
Mhm.
My thoughts here again, it's the whole idea of trusting that you're going to keep being resilient, trusting that you're going to keep learning, trusting that the universe and God, or however you want to put it, is going to keep giving you situations to learn from.
Mhm.
That is, I think, a huge, huge um, help to actually know that that's what's going to happen again and again and again. Is there going to be opportunities to test your learning, to test your faith, to test your trust in yourself again and again. How about you, Paige?
Yeah, for me, I have found it may take a few stumbles. I never care about backward steps. Heck, that's just getting more of your closer to your 10,000 steps in a steps are steps, right?
Yeah.
I don't care about backward steps. I just care what it looks like to brush off and giddy up on down the road. That's what I care about. What I'm trying to say is that I think trust is developed when you believe in yourself, understanding mistakes will come, but you have to have enough faith in yourself that you are going to get right back up on that horse. I think that during the past 3 years, I've maybe had two or three sugar lapses, but I always started over the very next day, straight back to my commitment with that. And for sugar, for me in my personal journey, that I do have to be black and white thinking on that. Other things I can be a little have a little more sway in, but
Mhm.
you have to know yourself. You have to know your journey. You have to know what you're capable of. So for me, I knew if I didn't get right back on that, that could lead to a very slippery slope for me, especially in those beginning years. And if you don't trust these parts of recovery, then anxiety and fear might start to take over, and those feelings can begin to undermine your success. So I have built up enough experience and faith and trust in myself that now I know I'm not questioning myself. I'm proud of myself. I know myself. I can trust myself. Then I'm able to just get right back up on the horse. And that is
Exactly.
so calming and so peaceful to just know I can take care of myself. I know how to do that now.
Agreed. That's so interesting that you're saying that. I had a similar situation around trusting the food. And I had to realize with the food specifically that for me, as I grew in my recovery, my food needs continued to change, and I had a lot more tolerance around foods in recovery than I did at the beginning.
Um, yes, that's true. I think that happens a lot that we evolve in our recovery journey. I know for me, like that first year was terribly hard. And I'm like, well, this is gonna be miserable. But as we hang in there and stick with it, it does change. And as women too, our bodies change and our needs change, and so being adaptable is another way that we can learn to trust ourselves as well. And you learn that just through experience.
Agreed. I spent many years completely disengaged from the world around me because I didn't trust myself. I wasn't open to other people's smiles or their gestures or overtures or even their kindness. I was basically checked out. And I rarely noticed when others made attempts at engagement. This
Mhm.
fueled my addiction to food and kept me stuck in that cycle. I got really good at overlooking or questioning simple acts of kindness. Uh,
Mm.
this left me living a life that was mostly isolating and sort of in solitude, which again completely fueled my addiction. Humans are social creatures and we need human connection to feel alive and complete. When we cut ourselves off from life-giving force because we're suspicious and don't trust others, we harm ourselves more than any act of untrustworthiness we could experience. Very true. What are your thoughts on this page?
Oh my gosh, I just thought that was so beautiful to put it. It's almost like a math equation, right? That, that the something is greater than the something, that distrusting is more harmful than any potential harm that we might get from others. I thought that was just very powerful and so true. We are social creatures and we were designed that way for a reason. Connecting makes us feel a bigger part of this world. We just finished hiking the Grand Canyon last week. When we're recording this, we just finished a few days ago, and one of the girls in our group happened to be her birthday. She was turning 72 that day. Towards the end of the hike, for any of you that have done the down and out, you start on the South Kaibab Trail, go down to the Colorado River, and then up the Bright Angel Trail. It's a 17-mile jaunt. The first 7 miles are downhill, takes about 4 hours, miserable, really hard. And then the next 9+ miles are all uphill. So very, very difficult for all of us, especially by those ending last few miles, brutal. You start slowing down. I mean, you're tired. It's a 11, 12, 13 hour day. You've been up since, 3 o'clock. So you can get on the bus and get there and get started by,
Mhm.
5:30, 6 o'clock. So here we are towards the end, and my ever chipper friend Jennifer started telling people, everyone. So towards the end, you pass people, they stop, then you pass them, and you're kind of leapfrogging back and forth those last couple miles. So Jennifer started telling everybody around us that it's Pat's birthday today. And she started engaging people in conversation and getting to know them. She could see that everyone around on the path was struggling, hurting, tired, and your feet do get so sore, your ankles are sore, you're just in pain. Every step is painful. But Jennifer really created this instant bond of unity out of these strangers. So when everybody summited, these new friends, everybody was friends and knew everything about one another by the end. These new friends made along that pathway spontaneously broke out singing happy birthday to Pat. So here, these big strangers that didn't even know each other, all in unison started singing happy birthday to my friend Pat. And it was such a beautiful life moment, all because Jennifer is a people person who isn't afraid to interact with others. And she is very trusting of people, and she makes everyone her instant friend. She's obviously trusting of fellow hikers, and she really unified a group. And I want to be more like her. And as far as feeling comfortable with connecting to, I want to feel like her as far as being able to connect with others so comfortably. She has a real gift with that. And I could see how that her world got bigger. Everyone's world got bigger. And it was a much more enjoyable to live on the earth in those type of circumstances. And as I was thinking about that, so where do you start with something that monumental? I think that a support group like RFR is a good place to start. You're surrounding yourself with people who have like-minded goals, and then you can listen to their stories. Then you start to dip your toe in the water and see how that feels. There is such a sense of relief when you start attempting to fight your way out of a dark hole. And then generally we can start to build on that momentum. And through those experiences, you begin to trust outcomes and hope starts to creep in. And
Mhm.
another thing we want to point out is understanding that meaningful moments are short-lived. However, those feelings that come with them can last a lifetime. In fact, for some people, it's these little life moments that create inspiration for a life transformation.
Very true. For me, those meaningful moments come from my own growth in this area. I had to learn that yes, people will sometimes disappoint, and yes, people will occasionally do malicious things, but in the end, it's mine to let go of that. It's my work to accept it. I need to move on from continuously licking my wounds so I can heal and start living fully again. Maybe we didn't receive strong nurturing as children, and certainly this was my situation, it causing wounds that never really seemed to heal properly. So
Mhm.
while it can be good to have a healthy dose of skepticism so as not to become victims, we need to teach our kids, and certainly, as we evolve and age in life, um, it's not healthy to remain closed off and shut down from the world. We must learn to trust despite knowing we may get hurt. It is only by opening our hearts that we can have flourishing relationships, seeing opportunities around us, and beginning to live a more fulfilled life.
I agree. I'm going to add one more hiking story. Will you indulge me? uh, we on this path of the Grand Canyon, that the last 3 miles did not have water stations as promised. I ran out of water, and I was separated from my group at that time, and I just happened to say to this stranger, "Do they not have water?" And he said, "No, are you out?" I said, "I am out." He goes, "I'll give you some of mine." And he saved my life. I know that sounds like I'm being dramatic, but it was 90 some degrees. I had been hiking at that point for probably 8 hours, and I had been out for the past couple miles because the stop before was out as well, and I had calculated that in. So just because I was willing to tell someone, I need to remember that people are generally good,
Mhm.
and I want to have that outlook and have that level of trust. So anyway, I just thought of that
Yeah.
in one here. So
Yes.
it kind of leads
Sure.
to this next point about what happens when people let you down. You accept that they are imperfect beings and move on. And what happens when you let yourself down? You do the exact same thing.
Exactly, exactly. And this is where, I got hung up in my journey. I didn't trust myself, and I think this actually made it impossible to trust other people.
Good point. And we often project our feelings and beliefs onto others without consciously realizing that we're doing it. If we don't trust ourselves to do the right things, we might project that onto other people and assume they too will let us down. If
Mhm.
we don't believe in our own inherent goodness, we likely won't believe in anyone else's.
It's true. Very true. I had a hard time trusting myself because I never really accepted myself. I sort of had this story of my flawed and imperfect beingness, and I could never get over my own disappointment because that's what I got growing up. I got a lot of disappointment and a lot of judgment.
Mhm.
And we can lose trust in ourselves in many ways. But the good news is we can also build that trust back up. For me, I built trust by realizing I wasn't living up to my greatest self. I began to make conscious choices to change that. I got help for my overeating and food abuse. I found the courage to take baby steps toward my ambitions. And each time I did, I built on that success. I focused on developing my personal strengths and growing as a person. Most of all, I strive to do the best I could in any given situation. Did I fail sometimes? Absolutely. Did I still let myself down? Yes. I'm imperfect, and that's okay because I find that when I'm doing the best I can, it allows for occasional stumbles without beating myself up or deciding not to trust myself at all again. So it's, again, moving away from that black and white thinking.
Mhm.
And I could do the same for other people. If they occasionally disappointed me, I could recognize that this is what it means to be human. I realized I don't have to see things black and white. People, including myself, are either trustworthy or not. I don't have to look at things that way anymore because
Mhm.
life is all about shades of gray.
Mhm.
Sometimes people will let us down, but that doesn't mean they always will.
I love that point. And isn't that comforting to know that
Mhm.
you don't have to live in
Yeah,
that paranoid, panic, fearful, distrustful place?
true.
Even if people make mistakes and even if we occasionally need to cut ties with people who continually hurt us, we can trust that most people have good intentions. And if we set the intention to always do our best, we can trust that we generally will, even if we falter at times. The way to resolve trust issues is to learn to trust yourself.
Mhm.
And when you believe that you are always doing your best, you will be able to extend the same belief to others. This will help you go out into the world and be open to people and experiences with curiosity and a pure heart without bitter preconceptions. I'm going to add, I'm going to I'm sorry, I'm going to say one more quick story. We were, before we flew out of Phoenix, we spent some time in Old Scottsdale, my husband and I. We had lunch and walked around the block, just killing time before the plane left. And my husband is a double amputee, and he sat down on a bench, which happened to be too low. We didn't realize that. So for him getting up from a low seated position is problematic. And we tried 3 or 4 times. We could not figure out. He could only get part way up, and just his leverage could not get him up. I'm 5'2" and he's 6'5". So that's a problem too. And after 2 or 3 tries, out of nowhere, I mean, a man came running up. He had seen it and it bothered him and he wanted to help. So that made me feel safe in my world, that
Mhm.
I can trust that I can depend on a stranger if I need to. And that was a comforting, warm feeling inside to know that I'm not alone.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a little sidestep.
Mhm.
But when we live a life full of integrity and trustworthiness to our deepest self, we can better learn to accept others' mistakes and flaws, even if they hurt us. We can also learn to trust that despite what others may do or how they might disappoint us, we will be able to get through it. Our faith in humanity is intact, and that is a lot better place to hang out.
Yeah, exactly. This really is a lesson that I learned in recovery in the last few years is, you know, the universe, God puts people in our lives that give us exactly what we need. And they might be total strangers, but we always get what we need. This helps us embrace life more fully and then it helps us flourish in our widest and fullest potential, really spreading our wings, right, and flying.
I agree. I agree so much. So, here are some lessons we learned in our own recovery that we hope to teach others. First, make being reliable a habit. That is huge. Being addicted can make you unreliable and unpredictable, which breeds mistrust. Make an effort to be on time, stick with daily goals, and show up to places when you say you will. I want to be someone who, if I say I'm going to do something, no one ever has to question. They know without thinking I'm going to show up. My husband's like that. I say he's reliable, dependable, and predictable. So I always know without a doubt if he says he's going to be there or pick something up or do something at a certain time, it's never a question. So I like having a partner like that
Mm.
too. We're both very hyper reliable and responsible.
So we're gonna run through these next ones quickly. So the next one is to celebrate small wins. Recovery is made up of personal milestones, and acknowledging your hard work and victories can help you to rebuild confidence and self-trust.
We can set, list, and prioritize goals. Self trust often results from self accomplishment of goals and belief in your own abilities to do what you need to do to stay in recovery.
We next one is to learn from our mistakes. Be patient with yourself in the recovery process. If you slip up, learn from it, get back on track, and trust yourself to persevere.
I have to make about a comment about what Jamie's last statement was. I was texting with her back in July of 2023, and I asked her a simple question. How did you turn out so great with so many odds stacked against you? Her reply was, I've had big epiphanies about my childhood, made huge mistakes, learned from them, and very honest about it all to others. My reply was, the key word here is learned. So many people just keep repeating poor decisions. I was so moved by her response that I thought it was worthy of sharing. And what she says is so true in relationship to building trust. I thought it was a perfect note to end on. The key to building trust is learning from
Mm.
past mistakes and not repeating them. The other key was her willingness to be honest about it all to others, which is another key to building trust with yourself as well as others. And are we lucky to have her wisdom or what?
Sometimes I still am learning always and still making huge mistakes. So I'm grateful that I can get back on track when I need to, but thank you. Okay, listener questions. First question, can you ever trust someone once they've lied to you? I think that this whole idea of the phrase trust but verify comes to mind here. It would definitely take time, and there are many successful trusting experiences that need to fall into place for me to trust fully again. Um, Brene Brown said, "Trust isn't built in grand gestures, but in small moments that people really treat what is important to you with care." So again, I think about, trust all inners and trust drippers, right? There's two different kinds of people that the way they trust.
Say
There's
that again. Trust what?
all inners and trust drippers.
Oh, I love that.
So, I've learned again to be somewhere in the middle. Sometimes I will go all in with someone until I feel like there's things that they've proven to me that I can't trust, and then I have to just go in small doses.
Mhm.
What's the next question, Paige?
Okay, the next one is, do you really trust yourself completely? I find that very hard to believe. Well, that's understandable. And I can say with full honesty that I do. It definitely takes time. And I like to say you really find out what you are made of by the decisions you make when no one is looking. For me, that is how I have built trust. And through repeatedly making safe choices for myself, that trust has come. And I would like to think that others trust me as well. Please know this is a process that is built through effort and small success over time. Let me share an experience to help drive home this point that happened a few years ago. I was listening to a podcast, which was very new for me, and heard all these speakers about health and nutrition. And I listened to someone presenting on mirror neurons, and that is how that's used in recovery and how we are like the five people closest to us. And that when we are close to people with common goals, we attach our conformance drive to them. And I was intrigued by this level of thinking, that approach. And so I ended up joining this recovery group after that and after listening to this speaker. And that was when the scales kind of fell off my eyes. I had been trying to do it alone all these years and missing that important component of connection as well as direction. In the recovery group, it addresses the brain, and I had only ever addressed the food. Huge mistake. I had been on every diet known to man, and no one had ever talked to me about my thinking before, just focused on counting calories and the food plan. That's all we ever talked about. Nobody ever talked about my feelings or how I thought about things or anything about recovery. So I now knew how to take care of myself completely for the first time in my life. And that was my late 50s. So much time wasted on empty programs that sold me mistrust, basically, and further made me mistrust myself because I was set up to fail, but I just didn't understand that I was in this failure loop trying to lose weight, and it was always a disaster. So, guess what? This new direction did for my trust. It skyrocketed to now knowing I can control myself when sugar is around.
Yes. Yes. Third question, last question. I made a mistake when someone I cared about with someone I care about. How can I earn their trust back? So again, I'm a big fan of using the phrase falling on your sword, right? Apologize, be accountable, own what you did, make right whatever you can, and allow them time to process without pressure. Move forward in integrity, accept that the relationship changes, and it might, and accept that you may not earn their trust back. That's really up to them. And all you can do is your part. It's a lot of that. That is the whole idea of it being your work to do and allowing them to do theirs.
True. True. Great episode. Loved it. This was very timely, and I think it's just so important. Really, I can't imagine a human on the planet that wouldn't benefit from hearing our thoughts around trust. So, if you want to find out more about real food recovery and all we offer, please look us up at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4, the letter U, and we hope to see you there. Thanks so much, and thanks, Jamie.
Thank you. And thanks to my dog who made an appearance in the middle of the episode.
Oh, we could not hear them.
Really?
Oh, mm-mm.
Wow. Wonderful. Well, hopefully he will learn his place for the next time. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Bye-bye.